Okay, so it is 7:06. We are going to get started, and this recording is also going to be shared with all of those who registered and posted on RISD's external site. So just as a reminder, the presentations during this event will be recorded and posted online by RISD and may also be posted by external parties involved. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for our second in our series of the Antisocial Social, brought to you by the RISD Alumni Club of South Florida and the RISD OAR. The RISD South Florida Club aims to connect fellow RISD alumni in the region through events and social networking. It's run by a group of volunteer board members with support from the RISD OAR. My name is Kathleen Finch, and I am the vice chair of the club. Many of our board members are also attendees. Our chair, Rhea Hunter, is also on.
Hi.
And communications chair, Esther Lutz, is also on. And while we would love to tell you more about our club, we're trying to keep things brief so we can leave time for the presentations and questions. So in the meantime, we encourage you to find us on LinkedIn and join our South Florida group. There we share event info, job posting, and opportunities within the South Florida region that are art and design related. So we encourage you to reach out to us for event suggestions, if you want to get involved organizing events, or if you'd like to join the board, please get in touch with us. Today, we are so delighted to feature two very talented RISD alumni, Ricardo De Azúa, BFA Illustration 2002, and Raul Justiniano, BFA Graphic Design 2002. They will each have time to present, and then we will do a brief Q&A at the very end of all the presentations. Please feel free to send any questions you have during the presentations in the Q&A feature. We will collect them, and then we're going to address them at the end of both presentations. Again, here's just a little plug of our board from South Florida. Okay, our first presenter, we're going to have Ricardo. Ricardo De Azúa grew up in San Juan, Puerto Rico. He relocated to Orlando, Florida following graduation and began his career in graphic design at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. He pivoted to digital and user experience design after launching his freelance business. He's had the privilege to have worked at companies like Disney, Universal Orlando, and Travel+Leisure Co. As the lead product designer at Travel+Leisure, his focus is on making digital products that are inclusive, simple, and user-centered. He spends most of his free time with his wife and 2 kids and enjoys traveling with them to mountain towns like Asheville or national parks throughout the country. And I will turn it over to you, Ricardo. Thank you so much for joining us and for presenting tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and just super excited to be here. So thanks for the introduction. Can you guys see my screen? Yes, great. All right, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I made the jump into product design and UX, and a little bit about just in general what that is and what that's like. So as Kathleen said, I'm originally from San Juan, so I'm not a Florida native. I've been here for a long time, but I grew up in just a situation where I didn't know that many kids that wanted to do art for a living, and somehow I made it to RISD and learned about design, illustration, and all that stuff. And I met really talented people. So this is RISD circa 2000. I believe this is the RISD farm. I mean, the Lincoln Woods State Park. And you can see that there's me and Raul. We're actually, you can see from our intros that we're graduated the same year. We've been friends for a long time since we both relocated here moved down here to Florida. But I studied illustration. I took a lot of graphic design courses while I was at RISD because I kind of realized that I was probably going to make a career change at some point and kind of pursue a career in design. And that's, kind of the preview of the way my career would go. So I started out doing print and packaging design at a publishing company called Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And from there, I moved to more digital and web design when I started freelancing. I was working on brand and print projects for clients, and they would just, say, "We need a website. Can you do it?" So I learned on the job. With that experience, I became kind of a jack of all trades designer, and later art director. That happened more at Full Sail University, and so learning on the job is really something I've always tried to do, and really trying to focus on what I want my career to be. So I started focusing on anything, digital design from, online advertising, web design, still doing some branding and things like that. And I really decided that my focus needed to be with UX and product design. So I began learning about human-centered design, the process of working in agile, with agile methodology, collaborating with development teams a lot. So learning how to speak their language and collaborate with them better. Starting to do user research and teaching myself the design tools. So when you're a traditional graphic designer, you're using a lot of the Adobe tools. Once you transition over, you're using those less and less. So stuff like Sketch or Figma, even Adobe XD. So teaching myself those tools so I can be able to work well. So from Full Sail University, I moved over to Universal for a lead UX UI designer role, and I redesigned their responsive site for Halloween Horror Nights event, which at the time was a mobile and a desktop experience. So really not a wonderful experience to buy tickets or find out information on your phone. So our goal as a project team was really to make that purchasing process and the experience of getting tickets, finding out information much easier. I was able to go to Disney, the arch rival, as a senior UX and product designer. And I really was able to grow my pure UX skills with a really talented team there. I worked on a guest experience application that is meant to help the Disney staff assist guests with issues they have during the park. So if you go to a staff member and say, "Hey, there's an issue I'm having," they're able to help you with this application that they can see your anything from your itinerary to past experiences that you've had. They can really it became a really broad application that you can use for lots of different things, and it was super helpful and rolled out to all 30,000 cast members at Disney. So it was a really great experience, a really cool project. And so now I'm at Travel+Leisure, working as a lead product designer. I work with an internal team of designers, writers, developers, as well as we use a lot of external design agencies and development agencies to be able to deliver more. And what we're trying to do is really improve our members' experience, either discovering destinations and resorts. And so looking at how our members, how we speak to our members, what is important to them, really understanding what they want to do, which is go on vacation like all of us. And so now that I've talked a little bit about my journey, I'll talk about a little bit of the why. So why do graphic designers transition to UX? It could even be any kind of traditional design field. Why do they transition to UX? Because it happens pretty often. And I can't really speak for everyone, but I've had my reasons for transitioning. And I found for me that designing interfaces was really interesting. I loved the challenge of understanding how real people interact with the experiences that I'm creating and how they are able to do the jobs that they want to do easier. And another really big factor was career and personal growth. So I was an art director. I saw my future as moving up to creative director at some point. And I saw kind of the limitations of that for my career. And for me, this gave me an opportunity to grow in a different way, more with the skills and the kind of thinking I'm doing on a day-to-day basis was to me a more interesting career growth. And so, there's other reasons. And so these are kind of just the main ones that you hear over and over again. So for me, the first one was a really important one. Decisions are much less subjective. In traditional design, a client or stakeholders has their opinions and they're treated like facts. So a client wants to change make a design decision or make a decision on branding project. It's really difficult to be able to change their mind. In UX, ideas and opinions are always welcome, but they're tested. And so if a team feels strongly about an idea, you take it to testing, and most decisions are based on what that user behavior was during the test. And so it's based on data and not necessarily what one stakeholder feels versus another. There's tons of job opportunities in the UX field. When I first started, it wasn't the case. I live in Orlando, so it's a little bit behind on industry trends. And so when I first started, might not have been, but now it is. Now there's tons of hiring in UX. There's a LinkedIn report that said that it's one of the top five in-demand skills UX design is right now. And 81% of respondents said they're being contacted by recruiters monthly, and 34 are being contacted weekly. And so that's already in 2020. Then 2021, it's only expected to grow more, just because more and more companies are trying to build more resilient digital products, especially after the pandemic. So meaning that businesses will need to focus on UX to remain competitive now. So a lot more people are buying or interacting with brands and companies digitally. They really need to make sure that those digital experiences are good. And the last one is better pay. So, that's one of the reasons that a lot of people say, I'm looking at making a career change to UX. I heard, you make a lot more money. And so according to a 2020 Glassdoor report, the median salary for a UX designer is $90,000. So these are some of the reasons why some people, this conversation or this presentation might have piqued some people's interest, or even just people that are looking at changing. These are some of the reasons, but, and these are all great reasons. It's also understanding what the job is and not really just focusing on what the benefits are, but really what is the job, and how can it be a good career choice for you? Isn't necessarily it's not the end goal, but what is it? So for people that might not be as knowledgeable about what it is, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the differences are. The main differences are between traditional design and UX and product design. So UX designers' job is to make digital experiences simple, enjoyable, and made specifically for the people using that product. They always think about what the user needs, keeps the user at the center of every design decision, and they work with user researchers, visual designers, developers to build websites or apps. And you're going to hear me refer to like UX design and product design a lot. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about what the difference is between the two, and it's a little bit of a difference. So a UX designer is really focused on that user experience, but a product designer is a UX designer with stronger visual design skills. So it's someone that has a little bit more of those traditional design skills, so typography, layout, those type of things, and And it's becoming more and more common role just because companies are realizing the benefit of having a more end-to-end designer, or someone that can take something from the research phase all the way to delivery. And as and one of the big things as a graphic designer, you're not really focusing on the user as much. You're focusing on either a brief or just customer, who this customer is, but it's not necessarily looking at specific users that are using your things and seeing that. So a UX designer is really about the user and trying to make the users happy, because if they do that, then the product will be successful. And so this is a little bit about the process. It's pretty different than traditional design. There might be some correlations or some overlap. But it's a subtle difference, I would say. The process is really about, you base your decisions on the research data. So the research you start, you follow users, you see them using you see them using what they're using at the time, whether it's an existing product that you're trying to improve or something that you're trying to replace. You do a lot of interview questions. You do a lot of user interviews. You find out what their needs are. From there, you start designing. So you create, designs. You start with really rough ideas with, wireframes and things like that to try and get ideas, and you start testing those. So even though you're just in a rough design phase, you're still trying to see if you're trying to see if your decisions are really really correlating to the needs of the user. And then you continue on that test, and then you design again, and then you launch, and you rinse and repeat. So this is a process that's very cyclical. And so a big difference between traditional design and UX design is that there is a done when you finish a project in graphic design. You finish a brochure, a branding project, it's done. It's out of your plate. When you're in UX or product design, you launch a feature or a product, and you're instantly back to researching, doing testing, designing, and improving that product. So you have to be okay with letting go and shipping something that might not be up to your standards, because throughout your research that it's viable enough to your user base, and that you'll be testing and iterating to improve that product. So the quicker you get it out to market, the faster you can learn. And so, this is a good kind of, differentiation. I remember being a graphic designer and having 15 final files for one project. And in UX, that's not the case. There is no final files for anything. And so it really is about launching and learning as you go. And that, when you put something out in the world, you can really learn from your users and make some real improvements. Another big thing that I like to think about as a big difference is assumptions. So, before I was a UX designer, you're taught to really put yourself in other people's shoes, but not really observe people. You're still bringing your own knowledge, your experiences, and your biases to this fictional person that you've created in your head. Whereas in product design and UX design, you're actually observing real people doing the things that they do, not you, because you're not the user, you're the maker. So you have to look at how people are really doing things. These are, one of the things that people always say is, oh, it's a mobile device, you just put a hamburger menu on there. And for a long time, that was an assumption from people that were, more tech savvy, or, people that had more experience with digital products. They knew what that was, but many people didn't. And so now, after a lot of research and testing, it's been proven that by adding the word menu under that icon, like, people now understand it way more, and it's easier to use that menu on a mobile device or even a desktop device, because now it has context to what that icon is. So, you think, oh, everyone knows how to eat a taco, and you're always surprised by how your products are used by real people. And so, if you see someone eating a taco like this, you might think maybe it's time to redesign the taco so that people know how to use it a little bit better. You can't always just rely on that knowledge that you have as a designer and a maker of digital products that knows basically what people should be doing. And so what are some of the skills that you have as a traditional graphic designer that really are transferable into UX design? Because there's a lot of skills that aren't. So to me, a good product designer is really someone that is expected to master the craft of traditional design skills. So skills like typography, hierarchy, color, iconography, and layout. Like those are really important things in digital design, but also in lots of other mediums. So print design, packaging design, you have to know how to really understand layout. And so, when you think about apps that create a sense of joy or loyalty with their users, it's not only the experience design, it's also the visual design that makes people really connect and love that app. That's, I think, one of the biggest issues in our industry. So many designers, product designers and UX designers are coming directly from boot camps without traditional design backgrounds, and they just don't have enough of those skills, and so they're learning those on the job. And sometimes it's harder to learn those traditional skills if you don't have an eye for them and you don't have that kind of taste. It really is difficult to gain that knowledge. And so I feel like right now there's not enough product designers that have both the good UX background and visual design skills. And so, one of the things that I like to tell my graphic designer friends is if it's something that's interesting to you, you should definitely pursue it, because having those design skills is imperative, I think, for the future of product design. And so how do you transition? There are some actionable steps that you can take to transition or just to learn if UX and product design are a good fit for you. So, the first thing you do for everything is, before you sign up for an expensive boot camp or anything like that, I would recommend just read books, talk to people that know about product design UX, ask them for recommendations, watch YouTube videos of just people either talking or podcasts talking about designing digital products. Just get more familiar with that environment, what they talk about, what they are interested in, what the work is, and then follow. Another thing is following UX and product designers on social media, or listening to them speak, signing up for inexpensive online courses. So there's tons with Skillshare, Coursera, places like the Interaction Design Foundation, lots of different options that you can just take some courses and learn, see if this is what you're interested in. There's local meetups, so things like this event, but here in Orlando we have a UX meetup that's great. That there's people of all ranges, from seasoned UX designers to novice people that are trying to transition, new students. So it's a great place to meet people, to talk about the career, talk about what that is. Something that I always push for: if you have a freelance business, start doing digital work. So start marketing yourself as a UX designer, or at least after you learn a little bit, start trying to do it on the job, trying to do it for real, getting some experience, getting some real life experience building websites and learning and trying to apply some of these skills. And then the last thing, and this is something that has just happened to me recently, is if you're in a current job and you have a UX team or a product team, go over to them and talk to them and see if there's a way for you to either shadow or collaborate with them more, but really understanding what they're doing and really seeing if this is a good fit for you. And then if you go through that whole process and you're starting to kind of move in that direction, then I would say, there's two big things that you should do. Is really connect with mentors that can help you along the way. So once you're starting to do the work, you shouldn't go to a mentor if you're just starting out, unless there's somebody you know, somebody that you have a relationship with that will help you because of your friendship or just connection. But once you're doing the work of actually learning and building out your skill set, connect with actual mentors that are either in your organization, other organizations in your area, local mentoring programs. The Awesome Design People list is a great resource with tons of amazing designers that are giving their time to help people with portfolio reviews, helping them with whether it's interview techniques, things like that. And they can help you navigate the change of career and give you kind of practical advice about all those things. And then enrolling in a UX bootcamp is, a great way to really, compress your time, build out those other skills that you don't have, and add them to your, your traditional design skills, typography, and all that stuff, and kind of unify those. And by having gone through both, you come up with actual work. You come up with either an app or some sort of project that is a real thing after you walk out of that boot camp. So, if that's the way you like to learn, if you have the resources and the time to do that, it's definitely something I would recommend to be able to kind of jumpstart that career. And these are just some of the places that have those types of boot camps that well-known boot camps that are known throughout the industry. And so that's kind of just a quick synopsis of my transition, the transition of a lot of designers that have moved from traditional design to UX and product design. And if you guys have any questions, I know we might have limited time today, so connect with me on LinkedIn, ADP list, I'm on there, and I'm on Dribble as well, and that connects to my personal site and all that stuff. So please connect with me, ask any questions. I'm always really passionate about mentoring people and helping people that are trying to break into the industry because I had so many people that did it for me. So yeah, any questions, please reach out. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. That was some amazing information. And we are getting a lot of great questions, some of which I think you did answer in your presentation. And we will be returning to Q&A after Raul's presentation. But thank you so much for all the advice, Ricardo. And certainly sounds like RISD students would have some transferable skills to UX. So thank you for sharing that.
Tons.
And again, we will get back to the Q&A. So feel free to keep entering the questions in there. And then I will read through them at the end of the presentations. But first, next, we are going to go to our second presenter, Raul Justiniano. Raul is a multidisciplinary designer specializing in experience design for the web, apps, and digital products. He enjoys being a problem solver who cares about crafting products and experiences that are useful, usable, and beautiful. Raul currently leads as UX design manager at Restaurant Brand International, building apps for the world's most beloved quick service brands. And I will turn it over to you, Raul. Oh, Raul, I think you are on mute still.
Hi guys, sorry, I was on mute. You can see my screen correctly, right? Perfect. So, like I was introduced as I'm the UX design manager for Restaurant Brands. What I'm going to talk about is I joined the team maybe a year and a half ago. Well, it was in March, end of March, just before the pandemic. So I joined the team 2 weeks before we were kind of sent home. So what I'll be talking about is I was essentially hired to build out a product design team. I was the sole designer in a team primarily of 100 developers, 10 product managers. They didn't have any in-house designers. I was hired to essentially build out the team. So imagine building a team when everybody is essentially not in the same place and sent home to work. So I'll be talking about kind of like what it's like to create a 100% remote, 100% collaborative design team, which was essentially my goal as I built out the team. So RBI, we own Popeyes, Burger King, and Tim Hortons. The team that I'm part of is we develop all the platforms for the 3 brands. That includes native apps, websites, kiosks, and all the platforms that the franchisees use to manage products and items for their stores. This is our consumer tech group. When I joined, it was primarily product managers and engineers working with third-party vendors for their design solutions. So I was hired to be the design manager and essentially build out a team from scratch that can support all the tasks that we do. So these are the apps that we support. Essentially, what we're building is a white label solution for these 3 franchisees, always thinking in terms of if our company acquires another brand or if we branch off into some kind of private label brand, to be able to kind of support them with the same digital tools that we currently have, which is native app, websites, responsive, everything kiosk. So what I came into was basically there was a lot of platforms. And there was a lot of design to do, and I needed to get to work in terms of building out the team. When I got there, it was me, and I was able to hire a designer at first. And this was basically us on a day-to-day basis, planning out our strategy on whiteboards, meeting with the brands, meeting with the product team and the engineers in terms of figuring out how we were going to launch features and what those features should look like. When we were sent home for the pandemic, we realized that these are essentially some of our users, essentially the people that work at the restaurant. We interacted with them constantly to kind of make sure that our app made their job easier, alongside the users who use it to order a burger and fries or fried chicken. So one of the things that we noticed when we were kind of sent off was it was going to be really easy to do all the functional stuff, designing screens, designing flows, but the collaborating and creating a culture in a design team that we're building was going to be very difficult, because as soon as everybody kind of got sent home, people started leaving. The designer who I initially had with me moved to Wisconsin to be kind of closer to her family during the whole pandemic. So we continued to work, but we were different timelines. And different area codes in terms of collaborative. Also, a lot of the designers that started joining our team were remote. A lot of the people on our team were from Seattle, from Colorado. We have a group of designers in Brazil. Essentially, we were all different time zones. We probably had 1 or 2 hours where everybody was available at the same time. So it became very clear that the way we had originally intended to work, had to change. So again, the idea was what we're doing is fun. We're helping people order a burger, a Whopper, their spicy chicken sandwich. And the idea of us not being able to connect and really communicate directly with users was a big issue. So we needed to kind of create a framework that would allow us to collaborate remotely and capture a lot of the nuances of being able to communicate directly on site. So what we realized is remote collaboration required good tools, good communication, and good documentation. along with great empathy, which means we had to understand that not everybody was available at the same time. Not everybody had the same environment. Some of us, like I myself, have kids. When I was sent home, it's not the same thing to be sent home to a studio where you can kind of get work done. And instead, I remember the first few months of being sent home, it was like going back home and also having to help my kids out because we were essentially running a homeschool at the same time. So there was a lot of challenges. At the same time, my designer at the time was in the midst of about to have a baby, so there was a lot going on. So a lot of our interactions had to be dependent on empathy, like understanding like some people may not make a meeting, sometimes may run late. We had connection issues all the time in terms of like video conferencing. So these were our 5 kind of core intentional strategies for collaborating together. We did simultaneous communications primarily through Slack. By simultaneous communications, meaning that essentially sometimes you would send out a message and you would not receive a response until maybe a half hour or even an hour later. We established design cycles. We set up our projects to be intentionally overlapping so that we would be intentional about working with each other and having to ask questions and ask for advice. We moved all our platforms, all our tools into a shared cloud. Everything was now on the cloud and can be accessed from any computer, from anywhere, and saved remotely. And then writing documentation became really important for us because there was no longer kind of like an easy way to ask somebody for something. We needed a place to kind of jot things down and be able to onboard as we continue to hire full-time designers who I have never met in person. I've interviewed them. I've seen that they can do the work, but I've never actually met with them. It was really important for us to have an appropriate documentation where we can onboard them appropriately and have them be like, here's how we work, here's our design principles, here's the tools that we use, and so that at least they could have some kind of like reference as to what to do. This is Popeye. This is kind of the elements that we work with as we're designing. With UX design, you're not necessarily working in creating a lot of these elements. What we're doing is we're taking a lot of these brand guidelines and applying them to the digital space. So a lot of it involves collaborating with the brands. We would have meetings amongst our team. We would have meetings amongst the brands to make sure that what we're building and the experiences that we're creating align to the attitude and the personality of the brand. So I'm just going to go through the kind of the core initiatives that we had for simultaneous communication. It allowed us to kind of navigate through the different time zones. In Slack, basically people logged in different times. You could send out messages. We use Slack really well in terms of creating channels for those things that are relevant to the project that you're working on. So if you're working on a specific vertical, like you're working on ordering or you're working on location, we would have a channel just set up for that. And the people that were relevant and the stakeholders relevant to that topic would be in that channel. So that would be branding, developers, product managers, and designers. We also have kind of broader channels where it's like developers and designers, where if a designer had a question for a developer but they didn't know who to ask, they would just throw it in there and you would eventually get a response. Same thing for developers. If they had a question about something related to design where they didn't know how it should look, they would put in a question in that channel and somebody in our team would respond or tag the appropriate person that would have the answer. Also, the ability to kind of do simultaneous communication allows you to kind of design and go into deep work. You don't constantly have to be interrupted. You can kind of put away those communication tools for like an hour or two so you could just focus on your work. And that's really important as a designer. You have to be able to kind of like put aside all the communication, get to work, and then return back into the collaborative environment and kind of like the workshops. It also allowed us to find balance. The idea that in Slack, you could let people know, okay, I'm out of this, even though you might be already working or maybe just started working because of your time zone, it's great. A lot of our, at the beginning, a lot of our collaboration looked like this, where you had different people on video, and then you'd have some people in the same room. Eventually, people started moving remotely. We're actually, now that in the next week, we're coming back as a flex schedule, it's gonna look much more like this, where there's a group of people in the office working together, and we have to find ways to also incorporate everybody else who's remote and in different time zones. In terms of the rituals that we established for the design cycles, we basically have one design team review a week. We have one design and product team review a week. That's an opportunity where we have an agenda of, these are all the things that we have ready to review that we need insight, and they're usually half hour to an hour, and we go through it very, very sequential. Like, here's a design, let's talk about it. We annotate all the comments digitally on the board. What's great about that is, before we would do these reviews in person, and somebody would have to take notes of what we're doing. Now we're kind of able to kind of digitally annotate all the designs with all the notes that we're having, and everybody, we use primarily for our reviews, we use Figma and Figma Jams, where everybody's able to kind of put post-it notes on things, put questions, and we can annotate it and kind of like use that to later on document what we've done. We have 2 design statuses a week where we meet as a group, we talk about what we're doing. They're very short, 15 to 20 minutes. I have one-on-ones with the designers. And then bi-monthly, we do kind of design jams, or on call. Essentially, design jams for us are, if you're working on something and you're kind of stuck and you need some inspiration, or you need people to kind of like give you feedback, we have kind of like this template where, like, you put in, this is the designs that I'm working on, this is the problem, this is what I'm trying to solve. And everybody kind of jumps in and gives suggestions, throws in ideas. And the ultimate goal is that a designer can then walk away with ideas from everybody that can kind of unblock the problem that you're trying to solve. Again, all our tools are basically cloud-based. We went from tools that were limited to our computer to having shared tools. So like Figma is our #1 platform. We use the multi-design tool all the time. If you've never seen it, it's pretty cool. It's basically, you're able to see other designers' cursors working alongside you in the design. There's other things that they're working on in terms of like chatting capabilities. All of our other platforms are all cloud-based. One of the things that we had to kind of like search out was we use a tool called user testing, which allows us to connect with our users. What it does is, we're allowed to kind of send a prototype or our app to a user and view how they experience the app. And basically, it's almost like looking over their shoulder as they use the app to see if it's the appropriate way that you expect them to. You could ask them questions. You could have them talk through how it makes them feel in terms of using different features. That was like a big tool for us to have, because even though when we were remote, we can do a lot of the UI kind of ideation, even the flows on our own. But in terms of getting user feedback, we needed a tool that we can do that without actually being in the room with a person. So that tool for us has been a lifesaver. Overlapping tasks and projects is just something that we intentionally did, not only for having an intentional collaborative environment, but also to avoid having kind of silos where somebody's working on something and nobody else in the team knows what it's about or what they're trying to solve for. We also overlap in terms of how we engage. So even though we have 3 brands, we don't treat the brands separately. We treat them collectively. So if one brand has a request, we solve that request for all 3 brands, even though if maybe 1 or 2 will only use it, because the idea is that we're creating a white label solution that all features that are developed for any of the brands are essentially for all brands to use. So in this, next week on Tuesday, we all come back. RBI is having everybody kind of come in a flex schedule. So all this work that we kind of like, finally, we figured out how to do remote work. We're going to have to figure out what it's like when we have some people in the office, some people not. I think the good thing is the tools that we've kind of adopted, all the cloud-based tools, all the documentation, all those things will kind of move with us and adapt with us. It's made a lot of things easier in terms of like onboarding new designers, because everything is cataloged, everything is documented in terms of what the decisions that we've made in the design, our process, how we work. And of course, that's an ongoing process that we continue to do. This is where you can basically, if you have any questions, you can contact me. I have on my website, rauljustiniano.com. I have my LinkedIn address there. You can see kind of the work that I've done before. Before at RBI, I was a design manager at Perry Ellis, doing managing 5 e-commerce websites with a team of designers. It was more digital and code-based, but we did a lot of UX problem solving during that process. And before that, I was doing a lot of digital work, print work, primarily for small design agencies. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Raul. That was just really interesting to hear how your company has evolved and working remotely, and it'll be interesting to hear how that continues. We have some questions coming through. Ricardo, thank you so much for answering quite a few of them. There are a couple that do require a little bit more extensive answers. And Raul, if you want to jump into a couple of them, I can read a few out. And apologies for some barking in the background right now. But as we are all getting used to this, or still not used to the remote situation. But okay, so I think one of the first questions that requires a little bit more extensive response is how do you come up with the design to test, and what is the typical process to test a concept and develop a product?
You take that one, Raul.
Okay, so we do 2 types of testing. We do qualitative, which is smaller, like 5 to 7 people. Usually you create these test plans where it's like you create these scenarios, like let's say you designed a new menu. One of the things that we recently tested is we're redesigning our menu in our app. We redesigned it, we create a prototype, we give it to 5 or 7 people, we record them using it, talking about it, and then we basically view all those videos and pull out insights in terms of what things that we need to improve because they're either not clear or not intuitive. The other type of testing that we do is we do quantitative testing, where we send out surveys asking people about giving us like their experience. Like if you just made an order, we'll ask you about that order. How did it feel? And we have a series of all kinds of questions. Our testing is kind of still getting built out. Essentially what we usually test, we like to test everything, but you can't test everything. So what we usually do is we test those things that we're unsure of. We test those things where oftentimes the work that we do can be solved by just best practices, like make that button clickable by a button, like make that button bigger so you could click it with a thumb. Like those are things that we don't test, we just do. In terms of testing, what we do a lot is we also do A/B testing. We'll if we have a new design, we'll build it out and we'll do an A/B test with what we currently have. So yeah.
Yeah, and usually so the process of deciding what you're going to test is really about coming together as a team, and so you're working on a feature, you're working on a product. There might be 2 decisions that are equally strong, or there might be a few stakeholders that feel strongly about one and some that feel strongly about another. And so what you say is not, we're going to do this one because this is what we think is better. We say, well, let's test it. Let's put it out there. We'll do an A/B test, or we'll run some user tests on both, and we'll see how quickly, you do time on task. So how quickly a user can, finalize a task. And you can test that and see how easily they can do something. or you can just see general, ask general questions about what they're doing, but then you get back some insights and you say, well, we thought A was going to do great, but B won. So you're going to go with B. And it really is about like conversations, working together as teams. So there's either product teams, so people that are managing, so almost the equivalent of a project manager in design, but more somebody that is a project manager, but also understands the global vision of what you're trying to build. And so you have those people, you have design, you have research, and you might have other business stakeholders that are in a room or digitally working together to try and make those decisions of what is getting tested and what isn't. So, yeah.
Awesome, that's great. And just a reminder for all of our attendees that you will also be receiving a link to the recording of this event. So you will still feel free to, browse the presentations at your leisure and get some of your other questions answered that you might have missed. You can refer back to it. And again, please feel free to connect with all of us on LinkedIn. I know Ricardo and Raul are more than willing to
I went crazy answering questions. I'm sorry if I killed the.
No, thank you guys for jumping on in there. I'm just going to read a quick couple more, and then we can wrap up and let everyone get back to their evenings. Raul, do you have any books that you would recommend? Ricardo recommended Don't Make Me Think. Do you have any that you would want to add?
Yeah, Don't Make Me Think is a must for sure. To tell you the truth, I follow more like, I read more about like institutes, UX institutes, like the research that they do. To me, that's more relevant to the work that we're doing. I think books are great if you're getting started. I try to kind of keep up with kind of like research that's been done in terms of user. A good example is like what Ricky was talking about, the hamburger menu. Nobody knew what it was. They added menu, now they know what it is. And now we're going back to, if you go to Instagram, all the icons have no labels at all. Because now they're basically like, oh, you know what it means, so we're gonna take it out. So the thing with UX design and even UX research is that it's constantly evolving, because as people become more accustomed to using their apps and their phones and their devices, their behaviors change. So one big example is the pandemic had completely changed how comfortable people are with ordering for delivery. That used to be something that only a small, very tech-savvy group of people did, but now everybody's comfortable doing that, and it's completely like exploded in terms of an industry. So I think there's a lot of organizations that do a lot of user research. To me, that's the best stuff to kind of read up on.
Great, thank you. If there are any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat now. Last call for questions. But again, I'm sure people are willing to answer them after the presentation. I know, Raul, you answered that, there are a lot of job openings, but a catch is that a lot of people are looking for experienced UX designers. Do you have any other tips of like, would you recommend that someone create a product for like a personal project for their portfolio, or how to break into that entry level role?
Yeah, I was thinking about people that are transitioning into UX, and the challenge is that right now there's a lot of jobs out there, but they're looking for senior level, like people that already experience. And so you're like, how do I get my foot in the door? As somebody who's like a hiring manager that's hiring, like I want to hire new designers, but I can't, just because if I took a new designer and I put them into our team, they would have no idea what they're doing, because they don't have anybody to kind of show them the ropes. And a lot of what we're doing as we're building out a team is we're creating a design culture. We're creating a design format. So my best advice for people that are trying to get into is like, do real projects. I often see portfolios of people that go, boot camps are fine. They teach you the basics. The problem is you do a project that's kind of like built in a silo, right? You collaborate with other people. There's no real client. There's no real limitations. What I would do is there's a lot of smaller companies or even nonprofits that need UX. Do work for them, do projects for them, build your portfolio out of real world projects. And then a lot of it is also figuring out what areas you want to work in. UX is a really broad industry. So what I've realized is there's a lot of people that are really more inclined to the UX design side, like the UI, they like to draw and they like to figure out what an interface is going to look like. There's other people that are more interested in the research side, talking, interviewing with people, gathering research, looking at data. You could have people that do both. Most likely in a big corporation, you're not going to have the time to do both. So you almost have to figure out what area you gravitate towards and focus on that and build out a portfolio on that. Like a good example is when I was hiring basically we needed a lot of UI designers, people that can build out UIs. Now we have that talent, and now we're looking for UX researchers, people that don't necessarily want to build a UI, but they're interested in finding out what users do, why they do it, all those things. It's basically being a detective of how people use an app.
Okay, great. And I think we are going to wrap up with one final question. Ricardo, you said you had not heard of it, but Raul, have you heard, or that you don't know anyone who's personally enrolled in the Google UX certificate? But Raul, do you know about it, or do you have any?
Yeah, when I heard about it, I told a lot of my friends who were doing graphic design and wanted to transition to UX. I was like, you should do this because one, I think it's something that you can do in like 6 months. The cost is like, I think $25 or $75 a month, which is nothing. Here's a special, what I like about those programs is you're basically learning it from Google, who essentially is one of the teams that invented UX. Like they're the ones who established the design sprint. They're the ones who know all of it. So it's a great way to kind of transition and be more, because I think one of the most difficult things with UX is that as you move into that industry, UX is such a broad kind of career. Sometimes you're just being asked by people to think about an experience that has nothing to do with like a user interface, or like right now I'm in meetings where we're just talking about like when somebody goes to a restaurant and they get their receipt, what should be the appropriate, like and now we have customer experience, which is like that. So what's great about Google is that if you go through there, they'll teach you kind of like the whole idea of UX, and you could kind of understand like, okay, what do I like? What do I not like? Do I gravitate towards research? Do I gravitate towards working with people? Or do I just like to draw interfaces and do animation? So there's a lot of areas where you can specialize in UX design.
And even just kind of piggybacking on that, the different like skills and techniques, like, so somebody that does motion design can transition to doing just prototypes that are really high fidelity and are not meant for maybe a user to use, but maybe to sell a product to a stakeholder. So let's say you're creating a whole new, you're pitching a new experience in an app. Before you actually build it out, you might want to just do a quick design of what it could be and sell that to a VP or someone at that level. And so you need somebody that knows those motion skills and also knows what those interactions are. So there's people, even, illustration is huge in product design, where you're having illustrators within a product design team kind of building out these like illustrations that work throughout an app. I know Raul has had a team of illustrators working on the new Burger King app. So just really interesting ways to come into the UX world and not necessarily have to do UX research or even that type of work, but really understanding the career, understanding the industry is super important if you're going to transition over.
Great. thank you both so much. It has been wonderful to hear about your career journeys through UX, and also how the past year has been for you to work. So I think that was some really great advice for all of our attendees. And just a reminder to all of our attendees as well, you will be receiving a survey following this event. And if you could fill it out, it would really help us organize future events and gear them towards what you are looking for. So please connect with us all on LinkedIn and join the RISD South Florida Club and send any follow-up questions you may have. I know any of us would be very happy to answer them. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. We really enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having us.